All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Troop HR's learning session this afternoon with the incredible team from Leapsome. Today's live learning session is on Great Managers Aren't Born, They're Nurtured, with Kelly Poon, of course, from the team at Leapsome. If you're unfamiliar with Leapsome, they are an all-in-one intelligent people enablement platform trusted by CEOs and HR teams at more than 1,500 forward-thinking companies such as Spotify, Monday.com, and Unity. They drive employee development, productivity, and engagement. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to join us for next week's panel discussion in honor of AAPI Month on how Asian American leaders and their allies pave the way to lift as they climb. And you can learn more about that in the live learning session registration channel. A little bit of background on our guest speaker, Kelly, before we jump into the programming. She is the head of Global People Enablement at Leapsome. With close to 10 years of experience across L&D, org culture, marketing, and business development, Kelly is on a mission to enable individuals to unlock their potential and uncover their Venn zone of passion, profession contribution, and recognition through coaching and providing the right tools at the right moment. She leads by example in hands-on learning by continually experimenting and exploring new ways to resolve challenges. Quick housekeeping note before we get started. If you submitted questions during the registration, we do have them, and Kelly is going to try to incorporate some of them into today's program, but we will leave some additional time at the end of the session for some live Q&A. And so with that, let me stop my screen share, let me mute myself, and welcome Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much to you and the Leapsome team for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy and the community for having me. Actually, I've heard so much good stuff about the retreat you were at the last week. So I'm really excited and also grateful for being able to, be part of this very warm group and hopefully sharing and learning something with you today. Can you all see my screen? Awesome. So yeah, especially today, the topic is about leadership development. Is something like really close to my heart. And I do hope I can give some actionable tips, as you saw in the last banner that Tracy shared, that you can really take something off and maybe try it out at your company. So thank you for the great introduction as well, Tracy. I feel like you introduced me and my company better than I do. But still, maybe something a bit more of my background. So I did, as I said earlier, I come from Hong Kong. And my background is actually in organizational communications. Before I get into all this R&D stuff, I worked in a creative advertising agency back in Hong Kong for a few years. And I also, at one point, managing a team of 5, but back then with no idea what leadership development was about, like zero. I was literally those kind of individual contributor, and then got promoted, and then highly focusing on executions and making sure everyone is delivering. But leadership development, I wasn't sure. Like now I look back, that definitely a lot I could do better. And after I moved to Berlin, I actually did my master's study in entrepreneurship and sustainability. And after that, I was fortunate enough to kind of found my passion and love in R&D. I hope some of you as well here. And since then, yeah, I've been in this field. And right now at Leapsome, I'm specialized a bit more in the CS enablement side of things. At Leapsome, so you already know a bit about Leapsome, so I won't go too deep into it. But I really like what Tracy pointed out, and I also put it here is, I think nowadays I would really like to call myself a designer because I really enjoy trying and testing new ways to solve problems. And today what I share is also one of kind of like a product that maybe I designed at some point. And of course, there's still, of course, many ways to probably improve it, but there's some results that probably I can share with you today. And after all, what is my drive to do what I'm doing right now is all about people development, and particularly leadership development is something I found very fascinating for me, because I find leadership has a lot to do with discovery. No matter inwards, that you have to, understand yourself, try to really dig inwards about yourself, or being extremely curious about outside, about other people's and, the business and so on. I remember one of the challenges or one of the questions you shared at the registration was, how to help managers to be more authentic leaders, how to help them to know who they authentically are. I found it so interesting because I relate so much to this, and that's why I'm really advocating for all the leaders to really take time to focus on ourselves as well, to really dig inside and know us better. This is also part of the philosophy that I will share in a second of our program that I built before. So yeah, that's the bit about me. And before we jump into the core content, I actually prepare a little check-in. I would like to hear from you all. What are your absolute favorite podcasts or books that is about leadership? Maybe you're not listening to any podcasts or not reading anything about leadership, but that's the great point, because then we will share it in the chat. We will have a great repertoire, I hope, after the session that we can tap into. I would also share mine in a second. Let's see. Oh, I love this one. How to lead when you're not in charge. I had so many times this dilemma for especially new, more junior leaders, frontline managers as well. Radical Candle, yes, very good for the feedback culture. Permission to Glow. I love the title. I definitely would check this one. Dare to Lead, yes, Victoria. You read my mind. So while you're putting in, I also share mine. One absolute favorite podcast that I listen almost all the time when I commute to office is Finding Mastery by Dr. Michael Gervais. And I really like how he used the psychological approach. And when he invite or interview with his guest speakers, is always a lot to learn. And Dare to Learn, Dare to Lead as well. For me, that's the discovery, like the self-discovery part that I mentioned earlier. And one thing that I also really recommend is, like, if you're in the session, you're really looking for some hands-on handbook to help you to design something like leadership training or program. The Leader Lab, that handbook from Live Labs, are actually very helpful. I actually have it with me almost all the time when I have to do all my notes here. So this is something easy to use handbook that I would recommend to you. And I see, yeah, more and more coming in. So Tracy, will we be able to have the chat afterwards? So, because I would love
Absolutely.
to,
We can share that for sure.
yes, I would love to extract some of this and just to expand our repertoire a bit. So while you are still typing in and getting the chat going, sharing your favorite ones, I would just move on to share like what we're focusing on today. I will first share my personal experience, how back then I, with my team, developed an in-house leadership program, most likely from scratch, I would say, and what are the key learnings, and how I moved on. And then at Leapsome right now, we are building an academy that would also enable you, HR leaders, and also our managers to do this kind of leadership development, and yeah, to save us some time and resources and so on. So at the end, I hope we would have some time to also answer some questions or just bring out a few topics that we can discuss together. So, but I know it might be a bit hard. It's a big group, bigger than I expected. But still, I would love to keep it as interactive as possible. So anytime, please share your experience in the chat, or even raise your hand along the way if you want to add something, or simply use this Zoom reaction. I think the updated version is quite fancy. They would just like fly around. So if you have something you agree or even not, just use the reaction as well. And back to these challenges that when I read it, I was actually happy because I could totally feel that. I actually read through all the responses to registration. So thank you so much again for submitting them upfront. I really enjoyed it, not enjoy reading your challenges, but the fact that I can assure that you are not alone, I'm not alone. We all here are not alone, because, for example, one that I read that you're tasked with a task like building out this program to train new managers, but you've never done that before. So I want to say I hear you, I feel you, because I was there as well. And when it comes to leadership development, there's so many options out there, so many advice. It it can get quite overwhelming. Still, for me, sometimes it's still overwhelming to really think about what to extract as the very core to deliver. So I hope you will find something practical today that you can take away. But I also want to put up front a really clear disclaimer is that I'm not claiming to know it all. It's not possible. And I'm also not here to tell you the way that you can, just go and implement right away. There's no only one way. I guess we all know that. But I'm really eager to share what I've gone through and what I learned so that we can all learn from each other. So are we ready for the ride? Let's see this interaction. Oh, it works. I see a heart. Thank you. Kenneth. Thank you. So let's start the ride. Okay, I would like to bring you all with me back to 2022. Imagine you were me. So I was working in an R&D team of 2 at a tech scale-up, around 400 employees, and we have slightly more than 25% of us were managers. So, and it wasn't Leapsome, it was my previous company. Imagine you were me, and we realized that, oh, out of 4 employees, we have 1 manager. So we definitely should develop these multipliers, right? What would you do at the beginning? Like, how would you start? Just pop some ideas in the chat. Or maybe you are also in this phase right now that you realize, okay, we really should enable our managers. But how to start? Like, where can we start? I saw to build trust, to listen. Sophia, to have conversations with them, yes, definitely. Also to get some feedback from them. I love this one, to understand who actually wants to manage others, because I know a lot of managers, they just climb up the hierarchy, but they actually don't want to be a manager. This is also one thing that is very key that we have to clarify. So again, I'm going to share with you kind of like a 5-step that we've gone through, but this is just one way out of many ways that you can approach it. It doesn't mean that you have to follow through all the steps or in the exact order. But for example, someone already said, like, leadership survey, to see the gaps. This is also something like similar to what I did, but not exactly, right? So there are so many deviation that you can have from this. But the very first thing we did was actually to define what do we mean by good leaders. So before we jump into designing anything or even like talking directly to the frontline manager, we try to define the leaders first, what we mean by good leaders, the leadership competencies. And yes, I see the question about the slides. I will share it afterwards with some resources links as well. Yes, so we started by kind of defining the behaviors. If you have developed competencies before, usually it's around the behaviors that you want to see for our leaders, the values. And as you can see from these examples, it's not something like out of like completely out of very, very special or whatever, but it's still, I think there's so many studies out there already that we can lean on. You really don't have to reinvent the wheel and just like come up with something by yourself. But still, I think it's important to pick what is most relevant to your organization at that stage, and then to define it clearly, that to say, hey, these are our leadership competencies, and these are the things that we expect you as our managers should get better at, right? And another thing that I actually stole one line from one of your responses is what a manager really is at our organization is exactly about this expectation, right? Someone also mentioned earlier in the chat. So a lot of time people got promoted without knowing what actually means to be a manager. And the role of manager differs so much depending on your company culture, depending on your organizational structure. So I would really suggest and this is something that it actually was done before before this program was designed, and it was really well work done by our HRBP to have a manager toolkit to really outline what a manager covers, the role covers at our organization. I sometimes can even imagine it's like a JD for a specific, just be a manager role. What would be the JD look like? For example, do you expect them to have weekly one-on-one, to give regular feedback? These things may sound a bit trivial. You think, I don't even have to write it out, but sometimes these are the details that you can align the expectation to make sure they kind of implement a way that is most aligned with your expectation, how good leaders should look like. So I also attached 2 links here that are some great resources. that you may take it as a reference when you develop the toolkit. And we also developed kind of like this philosophy of leadership for us. We call it like a 3D leadership. Sounds fancy terms, but it was actually developed based on the 4D leadership model by Dr. Alan Watkins. And it was also a great book. I recommend you to read as well. So for this 3D leadership, the 3 dimensions are basically I, self. So the self-development, the authentic leadership that we talked about. We is the relationship, how you manage relationship with your team and your stakeholders. And then it is more like the objective business world, right? The tasks that you have to do, the things that you have to deliver for the business, the goals, and so on. And in reality, we often observe that there are leaders that pretty much develop, very, very strongly develop in one area out of 3. For example, usually like a high-performing IC, they are very great at it, right? Great at delivering those things. And maybe some people that they put a lot of focus on relationships, but less focus on others. But what we really want to try is to kind of develop them in a more balanced way. So to have all these 3 dimensions covered. So that's kind of set up the principle or the blueprint for us to anchor on. What do you think would be a logical next step for you? Like if you were me, now you have all this thing, and what would you do next when you start?
I would say building a performance review process that
Mhm.
aligns with these expectations.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Rachel. Yes, that
Sure.
was indeed something we also was doing. But for my role, I wasn't responsible fully for that at that point. But closely with the HRBP who was also building this, and we also constantly align on this and think about how we measure that as well. I heard someone was also trying to say something. I also saw some communicate expectations, have a workshop with the team to receive feedback. Yes, to align this with the leadership team to see if they also align with that. And this is also part of when we define the competency, the SVP of people also align this with the executive team to make sure they also align, of course, on this regard. And so what we actually did after that was thinking about, we have limited resources, we also have limited time and so on. We really want to understand which group of people and which skills should we prioritize out of this all. So we did a needs analysis to kind of help us to dive a bit deeper and understand a bit more. So this is something what we called the talent pool analysis. So we found out that, so basically we did all these calibrations with all the leaders, all the managers, and also got some qualitative feedback from the HRBPs. And then we also identified that, out of all this 25% of managers, a bit more than half of them are actually, we call them early career managers, which means they are more junior. They are managing people, but they don't have much leadership experience. Maybe they just got promoted, new in the role, or maybe less than a year of leadership experience. And we see that their behavior is still kind of junior. So that's the part that we kind of understand a bit more. And someone also pointed out in the challenges you shared that, it's sometimes hard to manage a wide variety of needs, right? Of course, different seniority, they have different needs. But what we decided is we focus on the early career manager, first of all, because it's quite a big portion, and also they're the frontline managers, so they are the really direct multiplier. And we know that we cannot focus on everything at the same time. So we decided to start from the basic and to refocus on this group and kind of do a step-by-step approach. And throughout this calibration, we also try to identify these individual strengths and weaknesses of those managers. We aggregated that and saw that, there are a few competencies, so to say, that is in general, we would like them to develop further on. For example, communications, how to be strategic, and entrepreneurship, and so on. So these also are some data points that we collected that inform our program. And last but not least, someone also mentioned about, the business, right? Do we talk with leadership to make sure they are aligned? Are we aligned with the business needs? And the channels we did, of course, with the SVP of people that are very close to the executive team, and also, again, HRBPs, and also talk directly to some senior leaders. So that's how we kind of just as another extra step to help us to narrow things down even a bit more. So, and I think when Rachel mentioned about the performance review is because we haven't got that process very well set in place, but I'm sure if you have already that process in place and those kind of data point, like those results of the performance review, probably can give you even better insights into, you know, what kind of skills that you should focus on. So I would say that's like definitely even can make it even better. So after that, of course, we didn't expect to do it from scratch all by ourselves. Of course, I was like Googling how to, you know, what kind of resources we can use for the external, to search for some external vendors. So what we actually did and tried, wait 1 second, my Zoom is gone. Oops. So yes, here, back. But I lost all of you. Why? I think it's the same issue, Tracy, you mentioned. Okay, anyway, so we started with the LinkedIn Learning subscription. We actually offered all our people managers a LinkedIn Learning subscription because we know that there are a lot of great resources there that they can learn and so on. But we soon realized that it's actually not very effective, especially if you're not curating them, you're not guiding them, you know, which course to take and so on. And the feedback we got was just like, oh, it's too overwhelming. I don't have time, you know, one course takes so long and so on. I mean, they're not cheap for a startup scale up, but still, it doesn't mean that they're useless. They're really good resources, and we actually leverage to integrate some of those resources later on in the program. But just simply giving out this kind of online course subscription somehow didn't work so well for us. We also searched for some off-the-shelf program, of course, but usually the good ones, they are quite pricey. Or the more reasonable priced one, you are not sure about the quality. So back then we were not very ready to commit yet to send out all this managers to an external program for the whole leadership training. And one thing with the external off-the-shelf program is one limitation is also that, you know, they are not that tailored. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have this philosophy of these 3D leaderships, we have our competencies, but usually those programs are not that flexible to tailor to our exact need, and understandable, of course. And also one thing we decided internally quite early on is we really don't want to just send our managers off for a 1 to 2 day full days training. So this is something we consciously decided we would prefer to try out. It's not saying that those are not good and ours are better, definitely not, but we would like to try out a blended learning approach. And usually for those off-the-shelf programs, they might be able to kind of space it out a bit, but still the way we imagine the blended learning approach is somehow still missing. And I will share a bit more how it would look in reality. So that's this, based on this criteria, we didn't opt for like a full external program. And yeah, but we also looked into or searched for some external coach. Unfortunately, we had some really good references for some good external coach, and we did use them in kind of integrated this into our program. And you will also see that in a second. So after we search all this, and to be honest, just researching already takes a lot of time. And doing all this thing actually anyway would also take time. And my creative side was like bumping. It's like, how about we just try and do it ourselves? So I was like, okay, maybe we just try and do it ourselves. So we did. So we had the 4 steps to develop it in-house, but not the very next second, but maybe 10 seconds later, I realized that, wait a second, if I would have to launch a leadership program, and if I would have to wait until I develop the full stretch program from scratch, and then to launch it, it probably would take forever. Like, I don't know when we can launch the program, and no, we're not going to do it this way. So I really want to make sure we have an agile and adaptive mindset. That's the key mindset of how we design the whole thing. And what does it mean is basically you design on the go. So so we started off with still kind of defining a 12 to 18 months roadmap. It doesn't really matter what time frame works for you. probably will work, but we think, a lot of things we have to work on. So we imagine the next 12 to 18 months, what are the competency in kind of what order we want to enable or empower people about this. So we also try to align that roadmap with the HR roadmap. Typical, for example, end of the year, you give feedback, and then, you have this review, people not getting promoted. You need to have uncomfortable conversations with your team, and over time, OKR kicking off, you have to delegate and so on. So we try to align that a bit with also the company roadmap. But when we have the roadmap, it's more like a blueprint. But what we actually develop the content, we only focus for the next 2 to 3 months. So for example, you see on the right side this the first few, let's say, focus themes that we had. I just first have to build an MVP of the feedback. And then once the feedback is out, we get some feedback in parallel, I'm developing the one for conflict management and so on. So basically you develop and deliver them in chunks. And somehow I found it quite interesting and nice for this approach is that a byproduct, so to say, is the manager also get better focus. So compared to, they are sending off for this 1 day, full day, learning all about leadership training. And then when they are back, they are bummed. But at the same time, they don't know where to start. Somehow this approach, I feel like I also get this feedback from them, is they get a bit more time to practice what they learn and to refocus and getting better at one thing at a time. So that's why we kind of also set it almost like a theme. So per that 1 or 2 months, giving feedback is the theme. And then I would just kind of engage them in that way, keep reminding them. And last but not least, I think someone also mentioned, a few of you mentioned about, asking them and co-creating with them. And this is something I found very helpful we had an official kickoff event to have them all together. And at that event, we did a stinky fish exercise. Anyone knows about the stinky fish exercise? No, I see shaking hand. Okay, so basically the stinky fish is just like a metaphor. A stinky fish is something that, you kind of try to hide and it's nasty, but you somehow would not share it all the time with others and tell you, hey, actually I have a stinky fish. You try to hide it, but the longer you hide it, the stinkier it gets. And then people around you will notice that, this is actually a weakness, or this is a big challenge that you're facing that you're not dealing with. So we ask all these early career managers, what are their stinky fish? So we had a mirror board, they put out all their ideas, and they actually find out that, oh, actually a lot of my peers, like manager peers, they are facing similar stuff. And to collect these ideas from a first, like personal, we take out, because the stinky fish one psychological thing is we don't talk about competency, right? We are not asking, hey, out of this 10 competency, which one do you think you need more development? You really let them think about their personal, emotional attachment to the challenges that they're facing. And when they bring that up, it's actually, they feel way more connected to those challenges and, those skills that eventually they would have to develop. So that's also something I would highly recommend. If you're starting off or in the mid of the program, you can always check in with them using such an exercise as well. So yes, so that's, I would say, this kind of like this agile approach kind of give us a good framework, but still, how would that look in execution? That get back to this blended learning approach that I mentioned earlier. I would say there are 3 elements to that we see as blended. You can also share with me, how do you see blended learning? I think it's a term that we use all the time, but everyone has different definition, interpretation of that. But the first element we had was to have self-directed learning paths or online training, e-learning, whatever, how you call it. Back then, we already using Leapsome. I was actually a customer of Leapsome before I joined. So we use Leapsome, and we did the self-directed learning path, means that the managers can do it at their own pace. And we usually would have, according to the theme, one path per 1 to 2 months. And that path, we try to make it as dynamic as possible. So there were in-house record the videos. There were tasks, there were like readings sent to them. And there also, that's the part that I mentioned about using the LinkedIn Learning, because Leapsome and LinkedIn Learning, we have an integration. And then I can pull out a specific video from LinkedIn Learning, and then I use it as a step in the learning path. So instead of they have to go through the whole course in, I don't know, thousands of trainings, I put out the thing that I find most relevant for them, for this topic for them. So I also got this feedback later that this approach, they actually, you can also see in the statistic at the back end, they actually use the LinkedIn Learning subscription way more than if you don't provide them or you don't curate it for them. And another very, very key component of the blended learning, and I somehow, I think I would never really give up on having live session. I know like they always say they don't have time to attend live session. They always say, I would just like, if it's like online learning, I can do it on my own pace, but so on and so on. But usually the most synergy that you can get from the groups and they actually have the focus is during this live session. So this live co-learning session that we did, apart from the kickoff that I mentioned, we also did a bi-monthly peer group coaching session with an external coach, and then to basically anchor again around that theme or the topic, and then they would bring their challenge, and then they would discuss with their peers. But one really cool thing about the peer group coaching is that instead of like just asking how others would do it and get some suggestion, they really would learn and practice how to coach, because they are supposed to coach their peer during the session, but not just to discuss the challenge and come up with solutions of themselves. So it's also a great experience learning of coaching skills. So I would highly recommend that kind of format as well. And last but not least is this ongoing engagement, and we use Slack back then to have a dedicated channel. We're sending nudges, celebrating some progress, also sharing some resources with them, just to keep the momentum going, so that they don't forget about it after 1 or 2 weeks after the path is launched. So that's maybe a lot already. How about the last step? Like, what do you think would be the last step? I think we all can agree on that somehow. After you do all this, what do you think you should do to, when you look at your program that you built or the thing that you launch?
Measure success?
Measure. I saw it. Measure, evaluate, exactly. Yeah, so the next one, definitely we ask about the impact. And I actually am curious, how would you measure? Like, I don't know, maybe some of you already are doing leadership development. Like, how do you measure the impact? Because I'm still learning. This is an ongoing topic for learning and development, how to measure impact. You would do survey, you would try to get some, I guess, qualitative feedback as well. Yes. When you say survey, is it more like survey from employees or the survey directly to the manager to ask them if they find the program good or not? Or maybe both? Yeah, both. Okay. 360. Yes, exactly. Love it. So that's also the first thing in my head, like came to my head was also, let's do a pre-post 360 and then we can compare and see if there's like improvement, right? But I got the feedback like internally, it's like, oh, it's too overwhelming, because in parallel, we also have other, performance reviews and so on, and 360 and pre and post is just too much. So later we opted for to use the engagement score. So I think some of you mentioned about survey, maybe also something like this, because we also use Leapsome surveys to measure employee engagement. And in those surveys, usually they have more particular drivers or questions that are very particular for manager leadership skills. So we kind of measure and observe and see if that score improve over time. We also set up, encourage them to set up development goals at the beginning of the program to say, which are the areas that you want to develop the most in terms of your leadership. They write down their goals. They really think about how they can get better and so on. And here it's also important to get their manager support, so the senior leadership support. So altogether, we also documented the goals on Leapsome. We have individual development goals. I feel like I'm like selling the product, but I literally did that back then. And then you can also measure the progress of the goals. So you can also see if that would be one of the metrics to evaluate the program. And one thing I would really highly recommend is to actually set up some focus group. At the beginning, I scouted a few. I know they're honest with me. I know they are also super eager about the program. I call them the champions. But they are honest, like they would give you hard feedback if you're like not doing well. So I scouted a few of them, and then I had regular check-ins with them. So to form a focus group. And the focus group is not only that you're getting the feedback, it also have a magical effect because they feel more involved, and they will also feel like they are in the co-creating process. And this ripple effect, they actually would also affect their peers to be a bit more engaged in the whole program. Because, they kind of are part of it, designing it. So they would also having this ambassador effect to the rest of the group. So that's kind of like this 5-step, but I also want to, I know that maybe you're thinking like, Kelly, but how about the actual, like, did you see a success? Would you call it a success? And what was the metrics that I can share as the impact? I have to be very honest with you. I couldn't share too much because later on I left. So after I developed, I launched the program. And after around 6 months, I left the company. But during the time, as I said, I had this constant check-in with the group and so on, getting this feedback. I think people really like the approach, but there definitely also learnings, and this is something that I would like to share with you as well. But again, no one size fits all. Maybe this learning would be relevant for you, maybe not, but we will have a look. So first thing first, for me personally, I learned that there is never the right time to start developing your leaders. As I said, researching conceptualization can take forever. It can take as long as you want it. So for me to really just like start and try to do something and iterate on your program would be a better way because you want them to think about leadership skills as early on as possible. So at least that's my take on it. And for the learnings, I also try to categorize them into, content-wise, engagement-wise, investment-wise. Like, what did I learn? I actually learned a lot from this process. First of all, content. Too long didn't read. Like, it's always too long. Whatever is too long. They're still like having not enough time. I got so many questions. I think maybe 1/3 of the questions or feedback you submitted was asking about how to help them to find time. They are already spread thin, how to convince them this is valuable span of time and so on. Yeah, that's also really reminded me how micro learning is important rather than this, again, long online courses or these 2 days programs, etc. But the learning path that we develop, I think each, they only have to do one per 1 or 2 months, and each would take maybe 1 or 2 hours, but still it's already too much for them, right? So I really have to learn to cut it short, be more focused, don't try to talk about everything, be focused, even, giving feedback, you might even further break it down as well if you want, so that they feel like it's taking them a bit less time. But very interestingly, even though they complain about they don't have time to finish the course, they enjoy the peer coaching session so much, and each session is 2 hours long, 2 hours live sessions. But the time flew by, and they were like, "Oh my God, it was really good." And at the beginning, of course, there were people that were skeptical and they didn't join the first session. For those who joined, they really love it, and then they will make sure they make time for the next time. So sometimes it's really not about they have time or not, but do they make time or not? And then, of course, they have this feedback, and more people also join, the next round. So I also have to say, I also learned so much in those sessions. I put an extra star there. So if you will be able to arrange this, I would really recommend. And you sitting in just to listen to their challenges and so on, you will learn so much about them as well. So in terms of engagement, I already mentioned, I don't repeat so much, but having the champions focus group really important, co-creating really important. But move on to investment. Like, I don't know, after you hear these 5 let's say the whole journey, how do you feel? How much time do you think we put into, and how much resources it actually takes? But for me, I really learned that it takes a lot of time and resources and energy, not only from the managers that we always care about, they don't have time, but we HR also don't have time. And also not all, I don't know for your companies, but not all of you might also have an R&D, dedicated R&D team as well. So I remember a few weeks ago, I was in another webinar with over 800 attendants, like HR people, and then they had a poll, and over 50% of them responded that, finding the bandwidth to create this kind of in-house management training is a struggle. So we all are sharing this struggle. And I also, unfortunately, I check in a few months after I left with my ex-colleagues to see, oh, how everything's going, is it going well, and so on. The reality is no one was able to pick it up. And if you don't have the right skill set and so on, it might just fade out. So it was a pity, but that's also why and how I move on to kind of rethink about how we can enable HR to do it at scale. And that's the time I joined Leapsome, but I'm not gonna sell on my company anymore. You can have a look afterwards if you want. But in the last few months, what I've been doing with the team is we're building out this Leapsome Academy. So you can have like a little preview on the left side. Within our platform, within the Leapsome platform, we have this Leapsome Academy, is like a little RMS that we provide some manager training. We call them learning paths. And the goal is the same. The goal is what we all share here. We want to develop better managers. And we would focus and cover all this like core basic leadership skills, feedback, meetings, effective meetings, coaching, and cascading goals, strategic alignment, also preparing ICs to people managers and so on. So we are developing the content, we will enrich them more and more. But as I said, learning from my experience, we really try to keep it short. So around 30 minutes per path shouldn't be so much of an ask for your managers. And we really try to design it in an interactive way as well. And what is great is on our platform, we will collect the feedback and we will improve over time as well. And the key thing is, it's for free. It's for free. I really feel like a salesperson here, but no, I think it's so amazing that it's for free for our customers, because then the companies, you as HR, you can really then invest your money, your resources, whatsoever, to focus on other things that really matters. No matter is hiring an external coach, or hosting a leadership offsite to get them together so that, to build a bonding and supporting network within your leadership team. But, we just really want to take this tedious basic training off your shoulders. And you don't have to research out there, what kind of online courses you should provide them and pay for them. So that's what we are building at Leapsome Academy. And these are some paths that would be launching at the very beginning, the basic ones, as I said. And yeah, I think we all here really want to have better managers and leaders anyway, but we also are aware that we have to nurture them. We cannot just get them fall from the sky. So I hope that you would also have the chance to look into the Leapsome Academy. The official launch is actually in around 2 weeks, May 28th. We will also have more information around this in the follow-up email after this event, so you can check it out. But even without that, I would say, thinking back at this, if blended learning approach is something that speaks to you, and if you would like to also explore that, you can totally also explore other self-directed learning platform on leadership, and then try to design it in a way that would fit your organizations. But they might not be free. So yeah, that's the bit from me. A lot of talking, unfortunately, because there's so much I want to share. But I don't know if we still have some time for questions or discussion, Tracy.
Definitely. We have about 10 minutes. If anyone wants to either jump in and ask their questions, or, You can post them in the meeting chat. And as you're kind of thinking your thoughts and sharing your questions, I do want to say thank you so much. And, one of the reasons why we partnered from Leapsome from the beginning is because it's not just about performance. It is about what do you take with that performance review and how do you improve, enhance, and build, whether it's a manager or an employee, skills. And that's what's so special about the Leapsome platform. And yes, I know it is a little bit of a commercial, but it's because it works. And when something works, it's really special. And that's something that will not only help our employees to perform better, but help us as HR leaders to be more strategic in our roles. And so, I mean, I'm excited for the Leapsome Academy. I didn't even know that was coming. So that's fantastic. And so in this last 10 minutes, okay, we've got a question from Lindsay. I'm happy to read them, or if you want, Kelly, you can just read them to the group. Maybe that's easier.
Yeah, definitely. Lindsay, just this question about how long was the program that I built, for 3 months or 6 months. So we actually built out kind of a roadmap for 12 to 18 months, I would say. I can go back to that slide as well. But the approach we took was to try to be agile, and then we only develop the content itself for the next 2 to 3 months. So we have on the roadmap, we say, okay, that would be the next 3 to 4 topics we want to develop. Then we allocate time to develop the content of it. But we spread the competency, we spread the skills that we know we need to develop them across that 12 to 18 months. Business priorities sometimes changes. Maybe the senior leadership suddenly see it a bit differently. They want to reprioritize what skills to enable them first. That's also make it easier because then it's more flexible. You can still adapt a bit along the way. You mentioned that you had an outside expert as part of peer coaching group. Yes, so we had we hired an external coach who was very experienced in doing basically this kind of leadership group coaching. I'm also happy to share the contact afterwards. Let's connect on LinkedIn and so on. Then I'm also happy to share the contact. I'm not sure if he's still doing this like as the main how to say, like the main part of his work, because he's also developing his own product. But I'm happy to connect you if you are interested. And what else? Is Leapsome addressing different types of learners in how the content is communicated? Very, very good question. Thank you, Mila. We try to really, as I said, make things as dynamic as possible. But of course, as an online course, there's always sort of a limitation that, but we did include videos, also some readings, but also something interactive that you can, click on, interact on. And I think one thing that we try to really build in is some prompt for reflection questions that they would help them to reflect. So I guess we at least try to have this different dynamic ways of presenting the content. But I would also love to, see maybe from the feedback from the learners to say, oh, maybe I wish to have more of this or less of that. Then we can adapt also along the way as well. If you have any tips on this, also please connect with me and share with me, because I'm not knowing everything for sure. Leapsome question: what size of company, headcount-wise, typically use our platform? I would say the majority is definitely like a startup scale, so from 50 to 500. We also have bigger like corporate customers that are bigger than 500s, but the main portfolio is definitely startup scale, so from 50 to 500, I would say. I actually am curious of this community, or at least of this group, what is the main portfolio here as well? What was the content? I guess the question was the content of the Leapsome Academy. So I have to say it's not like fully stretched with 10 different paths and skills yet. But at the beginning, you would already see a few of them, like here, for example, mastering meetings, power feedback, goal alignments, accountability, how to hold the team accountable. And from IC transitioning to product manager, people manager, what they should be aware of. And I think what some of you also mentioned about, for example, how to manage former peers, common questions from managers promoted from IC. So we will also try to address those kind of situation a bit in the learning path.
Thank you.
Leadership books, if you can recommend that a group of leaders can read together and discuss a part of the leadership. Oh, I love this one, book club. Yes, yes, I love this. I think I definitely would have embedded it somewhere if I was longer into the program. But yeah, I would say actually any from the list that in the chat we shared early on, because I think the idea of having a book club is the book is important, but also like this exchange of ideas and get them start talking about leadership is important. But I personally like, for example, Simon Sinek. I think a few of his book is also really good when it comes to leadership and kind of make people reflect quite a lot. So that would be, and of course, Brene Brown, one of my favorites, because it opens them up. They talk about vulnerability. You know, that's also something very important for leaders. For this program, how much time would the learners need to invest per month? As I said, we try to make it really, it's not a program. Okay, clarify. Or do you mean the program that I developed before? Or you mean the Leapsome Academy kind of?
I'm sorry, the program that you implemented.
Before. I would say back then, I would say 3 to 6 hours spread across 1 to 2 months. Right? Because the hard content that they would have to attend is like maybe 3 hours if they attend everything, if they complete all the path and so on. But it's not only about that, right? They also should practice. They also should, do some reflection and so on. So I would add another kind of double amount of time. So I would say 3 to 6 across 1 to 2 months, so to say. But a lot is also like we learn and practice on the job. So it's not that, I have to block, 3 hours a month to just do this. This is also something I try to repeat many times to them. It's not just about that. But of course, it would be great if you block a Friday or Wednesday, 1 hour to do the learning path. I would really appreciate that because there you can learn and then you can apply. Are you addressing a company implementing culture as growth being part of one's role? You mean the culture of growth mindset or like just continuous growth and development? If I get it right, Renee?
I
Yes.
think that a lot of times what ends up happening is, we see this as like an extra task, not weight, because we're implementing it and we want our companies and our employees to be able to almost enjoy this, right? So I know that's definitely some pushback that I've received for companies that I've worked at before. There's no real how do we determine that, hey, doing this 1 hour thing once a week, is literally part of the growth of your role. If you want to level up, if you want to be a better leader,
Yes.
And I think that's what I struggle with. And of course, having the pushback from all sides, right? Like not just me, but my peers as well. Like, this is stupid, right? I mean, that's a ridiculous way to approach it because it's growth. But I think that's something that I've always had an issue with, really trying to communicate as a company how doing these sorts of modules benefit you and are part of the growth part of your actual job description. When I say role, that's kind of what I mean.
Yes, I think it's a very good point. And I think it tied very well to at the beginning, we talk about setting this expectation, right? This JD of manager, you can literally put it as a point. We expect you to develop your leadership skills because we expect the leaders here at whatever our company is a good leader, right? We don't want just a manager. We want you to develop the skills. So you can make it explicit in that way. But also, I think exactly the culture, I mean, it's always easier to just say that, to implement or embrace this growth culture. What we try to do is there's also something back then why we didn't yet have a very, let's say, solid performance review structure because we really focus on growth and potential. So we call the reviews that we do quarterly like growth reviews, and we actually have to question this a lot about development and so on. So that's something maybe you can also try and do that. Sometimes it's also just some wordings like rephrasing. And of course, we also have it on all hands, also try to get the leadership like executive to talk about it. But still, a lot is at the day-to-day. And I personally, when I went to the office, when I chat with people, I just try to talk about this, like, oh, development. I've always asked this kind of questions, like what are your aspirations? What do you want to grow? So just try to get them more. And yeah, I would say it's an ongoing process as well. There's like no, you announce that and then they will adopt it. It's also a change management thing if you didn't have a growth culture yet. So, but really good question. I would suggest setting the expectation upfront and also getting the senior leadership buy-in. When I said setting the development goals with the people at the beginning of the program, they actually have to discuss those development goals with their manager, so manager of managers. So kind of to reinforce that a bit in that way. Yeah. Yes, the CEO or anyone from your executive team, if it's not the CEO. Of course, the best is the CEO, but if you have someone else to rely on, why not? And back then we had some, not the CEO, but then another person from the executive team. Yeah. Thank you so much. I see that we are also around time. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
the
Kelly.
discussion. Just one last thing I want to show. Where is it?
And as Kelly's pulling that up, we'll be sending out follow-up emails
Yes.
with resources from Leapsome, ways to connect with their team if you have any one-on-one follow-up questions or are interested in learning more about their platform supporting your company. And of course, we'll be posting a recap in the forum after as well, and really appreciate your participation in today's session. Kelly, I know there was one other thing you wanted to say. I cut you off there. Sorry about that.
No. I just shared in chat, like, let's connect. And I know what I present is still, I try to make it practical, but it's still a bit high level. If you really want to see a bit more details or bounce off some ideas, just reach out to me and I'm happy to have a coffee chat and connect, because I know sometimes it's also lonely and alone when you have to build it yourself and you want a sounding board. I'm happy to do so, because then I can learn a bit more and get my creative practicing out my creativity a bit. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day or night.
Thank you. Oh,
Bye.
you're a great group.